You're getting down to the nitty-gritty, Coach.
Wow, big games. Big games, yeah. National games, playoffs, everything going on this next couple of weeks, absolutely.
The season will be defined by what happens here in the next couple of weeks, particularly in the Big Ten East, where you have three teams battling for that final spot, and certainly all three of them very much in it. One huge game this weekend, that is our big story, and it, of course, pits Michigan State against Ohio State. The Buckeyes come in riding a 25-game conference win streak. That's the second longest such streak in Big Ten history. They have won 20 in a row against ranked conference foes, an all-time college football record. They're facing an MSU team that still controls its own destiny. Win out. They're headed to Indy. Mel Tucker relishing the moment as only he can.
I'm delighted, and I'm overflowing with enthusiasm and in preparation for this game. I mean, that's why we do this. We get an opportunity to play games. We only get so many opportunities, and like I told the guys at halftime last week or Saturday in the game, we got seniors, we got guys been here 4, 5, 6 years, so only have so many opportunities, and to play in big games, that's what you want. You want to be able to play in big games. You want to be able to coach in big games. This is, like I told him this morning, man, this is not rec ball. This is, we're playing for something, and it's and we're going to treat it as such. You got to prepare during the week for a 15-round fight, and scared money doesn't win. You have to play to win, okay? And then you have to have competitive greatness.
Scared money doesn't win. I love listening to Mel Tucker. He's just got such a way about him, and you can see why players love playing for him. So give me a sense. What was your mentality? You're coming into a big game like he is, a season-defining game for Michigan State. Because if they win this game, they are in the driver's seat, Wani, right? With a game against Penn State coming up the next week.
Absolutely. And I'm going to play off something that Mel said. He probably, the phrase that he used the most, I think, was so many opportunities. We only have so many opportunities for games like this, whether you're a freshman, whether you're a senior, you never, there's no guarantees that you're going to be back here. We all like to think that we're going to build a program over the years, and we're going to improve over the years, and our record's going to be better. I mean, it all sounds good, and that's the optimism you want, but the reality is it's here today. And when I was in games like this, I would, one thing that I used to do is I would always get our team in there, and I would go like position by position. Okay, at running back, Kenneth Walker, you're going to have to outperform Henderson from Ohio State. Can you do that? And I started doing that. The problem is that Ohio State has 3 receivers and Michigan State has Reed, possibly 1, and they got more than that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying anybody else on the team, but I'm talking about big time playmakers. These guys might be first-round draft picks.
Right.
So the point is this. So this would be my approach, and I'm just sitting here listening to that press conference, and I would tell my team, I would say, listen, guys, okay, we don't have to be the best 11 players. Forget about the best 11 players. But we need to be the 11 best for 3 hours.
Right.
In other words, forget about the matchup situation, who's thrown for more yards and who's caught more passes and who's got more sacks and all that. Forget about the 11 best players. We got to be the best 11. A team for 3 hours, and that's what we got to do. And then I would lay out the plan how we're going to go about doing that.
Let's get into some of the X's and O's of this game, because I think it's particularly interesting. Just given Mel Tucker's background, right? Mel Tucker is a defensive coach.
Yep.
And yet, by far, the biggest weakness of his team is the secondary. He is obviously acutely aware of that. You're going up now against an Ohio State team, and as you said, I mean, they very well could have 3 first-round NFL wide receivers. So you've got a problem back there for Michigan State. How do you approach this as a defensive coach when you know you might end up in a game where you got to score in the 40s perhaps to win it?
Yeah, and I got about 4 points here that I would talk about to win the game. And the one is we've got to get the game into the fourth quarter. And how are we going to do that? And by get it to the fourth quarter, I'm talking about get the game close in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Because if this game goes down to the fourth quarter and it's a 7-point, 3-point, 10-point game, wow, you talk about stress across the field. You talk about all the pressure now is on Ohio State. But we got to get it to that point, and they're so explosive. This would be a game plan for me that it would be a bend but don't break. In other words, I would play coverage and let them throw the ball. That we can't come out of this game like they did last week against Purdue, like they do every week, Ohio State, and have 6 plays over 25 yards or whatever it is. We can't do that, guys. We have to make them go 8, 10-play drives. And how are we going to do that? We are going to keep everything in front of us. And now the one thing, I mean, when you talk defense, the one thing that Michigan State has done a good job of all year is pressure the passer. They have some guys that can rush the passer, you know, the coverage in. And it's really strange, Trevor, when I look at them, because generally those two things are tied together. Oh, God, we're giving up more passing yards than anybody in the conference. Well, how are you rushing the pass? Well, we don't ever get any sacks. That's not the case.
Second in the Big Ten in sacks.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that's not the case. So that's what doesn't fit. So you're going to need pressure. So he's got to try to throw the ball. But I would alter my coverage. And I know they like to play 2 and they'll play some Tampa 2. But I would play off and I would play soft. And I would make them throw the ball underneath. I would try to frustrate them. And how else do you get it to the fourth quarter? And this is a big part. And this is the area that I think they can win. Take the air out of the football. And what do we mean when we say that? We're going to run it, and we're going to run it, and we're going to shorten the game as much as we can. So you make them go long and hard and see if they can go 10 plays without making a mistake. That's tough. So many, and I don't care on what level, high school, college, or the NFL. I mean, if you make a team go 8 or 10 plays and mistake-free, that's why mistake-free, I mean penalties, a drop pass, a batted down ball, you know, all those things that happen in the course of a drive. If you can make a team go the long way, boy, I'll tell you what, more times than not, they'll screw it up themselves. And particularly a team like Ohio State, because that's not their nature. They want to knock you out as fast as they can. So I would take the air out of the football, and I would play bend but don't break in the coverage end of it, and see how that goes along. Now, here's the other thing, too. You know, in big games like this, I would always say, and you've heard me say it, this is not going to be the team. Don't worry about the team that makes the most big plays. Hey, we got to make sure we make the least amount of bad plays. And your kids might say, well, what's that? Hey, personal fouls. I mean, everything, you know, Michigan State.
We've seen that from Michigan State, too.
Right.
They're heavily penalized.
You're right. And they're going to have to play this game, I don't want to say air-free, but darn near. You know what I mean? I mean, they cannot be the team that's the most penalized or has the most turnovers or gives up the most big plays. I mean, if that happens, you got no chance against Ohio State.
Right, right. Well, what about philosophically on offense? So you come into this game cognizant of the fact, hey, they're going to score points. Right. There's just no question that they're going to score on us. We've got to match that. Do you take more risks offensively? Do you do things? Wow. I understand where you're saying you got to milk the clock. Yep. But I'm saying, are there fourth downs where you wouldn't ordinarily go for it, where perhaps you do? You know what I'm saying? Just because every possession matters so much in a game like this. Every time you give them the ball. I mean, they scored touchdowns in their first 6 possessions against Purdue. So every time you give them the ball, you're acutely aware of the fact they've got a great chance of scoring. More often than not, they're probably going to score.
Absolutely.
So how do you alter your game plan in that way?
You're either better than I think, or you're looking at my notes. Okay, because I have written right next to air-free football. I have the onside kicks, the halfback passes, the reverse passes, all those type of plays.
They're the kings of the flea flicker. We know that.
They're the kings of the flea flicker. And in a game like this, that's a tough decision. I mean, because you just said it. Every possession is key. and the odds of completing, getting an onside kick, for example, or a fake punt, or maybe a reverse pass, your odds are probably 20% or less, So you take a chance like that, forget about the turnover. It's just a matter of not converting it and now giving the ball right back to Ohio State. So that's a tough one. I would have it all ready. And generally my philosophy was I would tell my offensive coaches, I want to be the first one to run a trick play. Because if you run a trick play first, the other coach sometimes won't run his. Then he has one over there, okay? So I want to run mine first. I would always do that. But in this game, I'll tell you what, I think I would wait a little bit and just see how the thing unfolds. Let's see the key. Let's see Kenneth Walker. He's the lifeline of our team. He is the lifeline of not just our offense, of our whole football team. And so I would see how the run game's going, and then I would decide. I wouldn't do too early, too many crazy things. I would try to play it a little closer to the vest and see what Ohio State has.
Now, does the fact that Ohio State has played in a ton of these big games, and for the Michigan State guys, it's not to say that in their recent history they haven't played in big games, because they played in enormous games, but this particular group hasn't really been in situations like this, where it seems like it's kind of commonplace for the Buckeyes.
Right.
To what extent is that a factor? Can it help you with Michigan State?
You know what's funny is this weekend when I was out in L.A. and around all of our people, all the Fox people, everybody's talking about is Michigan-Ohio State game. That's all. That's all everybody's talking about. And I says, guys, this is not going to be. And I remember when I first got into coaching, and we did this one time when we were at the University of Miami, and we were real good. And we did the Woody Hayes. Woody Hayes was getting, I won't say the team. Woody Hayes had Michigan, and then this week they had an opponent, okay, a lesser opponent. And Woody worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Michigan. And he came out and worked Friday, a little bit Thursday and Friday. This is a fact. This is coming from some of the Ohio State coaches who I knew very well back then. And they came out and worked about a day and a half on the opponent, and went out and beat them and had 3 or 4 extra days on Michigan. Well, people, I mean, that's not the case. Trust me. Ryan Day knows that they got to win this game. And I say that in jest and tell that story because the perception is if you're outside, it's, oh, God, Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan. No. Slow down. This is Woody Hayes, and this is not that Ohio State team. Trust me.
Well, that's where it gets interesting, right? Because from Ohio State's point of view, you do have that game looming, and frankly, Michigan's got a less challenging game this week, and so you do wonder a little bit about the tendency maybe for the Buckeyes guys to look ahead. I think the one thing in being around these programs, they're thinking about each other 365 days a year. They're prepping for each other 365 days a year. So I've got to believe that Ryan Day feels comfortable with kind of where his team is for that game. Whether or not they'll win it, who knows? But I'm saying it's not as if they have only allocated next week to prepare for Michigan.
Well, when they walk in, you know what I would have that get their attention? I would have a sign up and just put the score up. Michigan, help me out here now, because I'm going to be Michigan State. What was the Michigan State score this year? Whatever it was. Michigan State won, right?
But Michigan State won the
game.
So
I would have the score: Michigan State here, Michigan there. Can everybody read? I know we can. Who won, right? Don't worry about Michigan.
Yeah.
This team
beat them.
And that's all you got to see, a visual of that. And I would have that posted everywhere in the locker room.
Yeah.
That'd get their attention.
P rankings tonight as well. Only top 10 loss this week was Oklahoma, which seemed somewhat inevitable given all their narrow escapes so far this season. Oregon pulled away after being tied with Washington State at halftime. Michigan got an impressive road win. Overall, very solid week for the sports top teams. And we're joined now by Sports Illustrated senior writer Pat Forde, who is here for his weekly visit. And Pat, given all that, what kind of movement are you looking for tonight in the rankings?
Really not a lot, Dave. I don't think there will be substantial movement. I will be interested to see the revisiting of Michigan State, Michigan. I don't expect that to change. If they thought Michigan was better than Michigan State last week and then they go to Happy Valley and win, I'm sure that's enough to keep them there. The one thing to keep an eye on, Cincinnati, won by double digits, but they were playing a bad team, had some struggles in that game. Do they possibly slide Cincinnati back behind both Michigan and Michigan State? That would be the one thing I would watch for there. I don't anticipate it, but that's where my eyes will be when the rankings come out tonight.
Michigan State, Ohio State, obviously this weekend, as Coach Wanstead and I were talking about. Interested in your take on this. What does Michigan State need to do to have a shot at winning this game?
Well, I tell you, that's why Coach Wanstead gets the big bucks, because he broke it down very well. A lot of the things that he said, I would echo. I think that this is definitely going to be a game where you got to score points. You probably do have to take some chances and at least go in with the mentality that we can't get behind. We can't fall behind by 2-3 scores and then expect to come back. Kenneth Walker III is going to have to play like a Heisman Trophy winner. Peyton Thorne, who has a lot of confidence, and I don't think will be gun-shy at all in this big moment, has to play very well. Obviously, Jaden Reed, but they need another receiver to step up there, whether it's Naylor or somebody else. And then defensively, yeah, you just got to not get boat raced. Don't give up those big plays. Try to get after C.J. Stroud and pressure him into some mistakes, because when he has all day behind the line there and he's got those great receivers running free, that's when the big plays happen. So a lot of things have to go well. Not saying it can't happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they have a weather scenario like 2015 where you're just going to have disastrous weather to help you, but Michigan State's probably going to have to play its best game of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. Ohio State did a great job in protection against George Karlaftis. You talk about how can you affect the quarterback. It's something that Purdue does pretty well and wasn't able to do much last week. And as you say, if Stroud sits back there, he can really pick you apart. What would a win mean for Mel Tucker and for the Michigan State program?
Well, it would just be huge. I mean, it really catapults them into the driver's seat in the conference. It puts them, I think, probably in the top 4 in the playoff picture. For Mel Tucker, it locks up National Coach of the Year, Big Ten Coach of the Year, I would think, all those things. And it makes him all the more expensive, quite frankly, whether he's going to stay at Michigan State or whether he's going to be wooed elsewhere. I think this would be the crowning achievement on what's been an incredible season for them, and really would stamp them also as a national championship contender for sure.
We were talking on the other side about what an interesting dynamic it is for Ohio State to have these two really challenging games back-to-back here, and games that will decide whether or not they head to Indianapolis again. In your opinion, what's the tougher game for them? Is Michigan State the tougher matchup, or is Michigan the tougher matchup?
I kind of think Michigan State is, just because I think Michigan State has more offensive firepower. And look, you go into the big house in that rivalry situation, even though Ohio State has owned that rivalry, that won't be easy. But I just think from a pure matchup standpoint, I like Michigan State's chance at least to try to match points and go up and down the field with Ohio State, because I think that's going to have to happen. If you're Michigan, obviously you've just got to rush the passer like crazy and then hope you can make enough plays offensively against Ohio State. But I think this is the game. If I'm Ohio State, you got to be locked in and focused on this one and not thinking ahead to the big rivalry game that probably your fans are talking about, maybe even a little bit more than this one.
Yeah, that is the challenge. It's interesting because I would agree with you. I do think Michigan State is probably more dynamic than Michigan is. But, man, Michigan's defense is really good. I just don't think there's an obvious weakness to Michigan, where Michigan State has an obvious weakness. It's pass defense, and that's a weakness that doesn't match up all that well with what Ohio State does. But, I mean, man, you got Hutchinson and Ojabo coming at you, Pat. It's tough to get the pass off.
Oh, my gosh. I asked Sean Clifford. I mean, they just made life miserable for him last week. I think it was 5 combined sacks for those guys. And that's the blossoming of Ojabo, I think, has really taken that defense to another level, because before it was, scheme everything, being totally aware of where Hutchinson is. If we got to play away from him, we will. If we've got to, cut him and throw quickly, we can do that. But now you got to deal with it on both sides. And from that standpoint, I think it really has elevated Michigan's defense. And sure, there's no doubt that the Michigan State secondary is obviously the weakness. That's the reason why they went hard into the transfer portal at cornerback. But I do still think that there's a little more explosiveness for the Spartans to deal with.
Are you thinking any differently about Michigan after this game against Penn State? Did it change your view of them in any way?
Well, a little bit. I was really impressive. It reminded me of the Nebraska game, but I think against a better opponent, where it looked like they were going to lose, frankly. I mean, you had the game, and then it starts getting away from you, and you're on the road in a really frenzied setting, and then all of a sudden you make the plays to come back and win the thing. And so that's how I was really impressed. Dave, we've seen Michigan in the last several years just kind of fail to make those big plays, those clutch plays, the big moments, and games get away from them. Here was the chance where that looked like it could happen again, but no, they go the other way and they make the plays. Cade McNamara was outstanding, obviously hit the big throw to Eric All. Hassan Haskins just tough yard after tough yard and, bulling out those first downs. I kind of thought they won that game despite the offensive line being a little bit overmatched. And if you can do that, that's a great, great win. So for Michigan, that checked another big box along the way to a season that's really been a major improvement over the last couple of years.
Been a massive improvement, no doubt about it. And yet they're going to be judged on what happens these next 2 weeks, and most likely on what happens against Ohio State, unless the somewhat unthinkable were to happen against Maryland. How would you measure right now Big Ten Coach of the Year? I mean, Jim Harbaugh is certainly in that discussion. Again, it will probably come down to whether or not he beats Ohio State. But let's kind of take the next 2 weeks out of it. Right now, Mel Tucker, Jim Harbaugh, or anyone else you want to throw in there, how would you measure it up?
Yeah, I would give it to Tucker right now. But as you said, hey, all ballots are not in yet. The ballot box is not closed, so we're going to let this thing play out. Do not stop the count at this point. But Tucker, I just think, look, Michigan State on paper looked pretty sketchy. He went out and did the immediate recruiting, improved the product just so dramatically. Michigan obviously bounced back very well as well from a bad season, but I think last year was just more of a blip, where with Michigan State, you were wondering, is this a downturn? Is Michigan State now going to be non-competitive? And for Tucker to not just turn that around, but really get him back to the very top of the Big Ten, super impressed with that. So I would put him a little bit ahead of Harbaugh and Michigan there. But depends what both teams do against Michigan State, how this thing's going to end up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I am fascinated to see how these next couple weeks play out. It is often, certainly that contest is about which team exceeds expectations more and whose team exceeds them the most. It's why the Ohio State coach virtually never wins it. So because the expectations are sky high. Pat Forde, senior writer from Sports Illustrated. Great stuff as always. We'll talk to you next week, Pat. The Penn State men's soccer team pulled off an impressive double this year, winning both the Big Ten regular season and conference tourney crowns. First time they've done that in school history. The Nittany Lions topped Indiana 3-0 on Sunday in State College in the tournament championship. First time they've won that title since 2005. They will open NCAA tourney play Sunday at home against either Hofstra or Lipscomb. Head coach Jeff Cook is joining us now. He is today's big interview. And Coach, thanks so much for joining us. Let's look back before we look forward. This is the first time that you have beaten the Hoosiers in your tenure. You're in your fourth year in State College, and they have really been the dominant program here in the Big Ten. They'd won the last three conference tourney titles. They beat you guys on penalty kicks a year ago. So what did it mean to finally kind of slay the dragon here?
Yeah, good to be with you. It was a very memorable day. I'm so proud of our players for the determination they showed. And you're right, it was a rematch of last year's Big Ten final in the spring out in Bloomington where we lost on penalty kicks, and that's a very difficult way to go out of an event. So I think we handled the game as well as we could have hoped. The first parts of the opening stages of the game were a little bit nervous, a little bit tentative on our part, but then when we got the goal to get in front, I felt from that point going forward, we had some great moments in the game and really pleased to come out on top and win the Big Ten tournament.
I mentioned it's the first time you've beaten them, and they have really been the dominant program in this league, though there certainly have been lots of other very good ones as well. They are kind of the measuring stick. To what extent, when you started rebuilding Penn State a few years ago, did you use them as kind of a barometer of getting to that point?
You're absolutely right. I mean, Indiana's tradition, the history and success that they've had, it speaks for itself. But they're not the only ones, right? You mentioned other teams that have made College Cup appearances. Maryland's got 3 national championships. So we knew that there was a high bar for us to try and attack. And we feel that this conference is as strong as any conference in men's soccer playing in NCAA Division I. So if we could get at or near the top, we know we'd be in the national picture. So it's a good start, and now we regroup and get ready for Sunday. But I couldn't be prouder. I couldn't be a more proud coach of the performance we've put in over the last few weeks of the regular season and then into the Big Ten tournament.
So you essentially brought everyone back from last year. You had a Sweet 16 team a season ago. How important was that continuity in terms of achieving the goals you've achieved this year?
I think a couple things in that. Absolutely vital for us to people like Pierre Reedy, Brandon Hackenberg to come back for their extra year of eligibility. It gave us a platform to continue the good progress we had made in 2019 and then in the spring season last year due to COVID. And I feel it's worth noting that the field nationally and in the Big Ten, we're not the only team with older, more experienced players. So to match up against opponents within the Big Ten and then nationally, it's really going to require putting your best foot forward, and to have some of those players come back, like you mentioned, was just so important for us to get back to this position we wanted to be in, playing for advancement in the NCAA tournament and playing for championships. So really couldn't be happier for guys like Hack and Pierre Reedy to lift the trophy in their senior year or their 5th year. Excellent memories.
I want to focus in on one of your players in particular, Seth Kuhn, who I think fittingly scored the first goal in the Indiana game, so that kind of proved to be the game-winning goal. He has now scored 5 goals in the last 5 games after not scoring all season prior to that. How do you explain that emergence?
Well, I would like to joke and say he finally started listening to me, but that's not true. Seth's been excellent all year. He's been so important, Dave, in our possession play, but he's covered a lot more ground. If you look at statistically, his sort of GPS numbers and the distance he travels in games have been super impressive. We talked to the team last night after a kind of a recovery session, and 3 weeks ago, our season was on life support. We had lost 3 games in a row by a goal. We were 2-0 down to Maryland, and Seth got the tying goal in that game, which started us off on this kind of streak we've had, and he's been really important. His goals have been from really dangerous positions, mostly from the edge of the penalty area. So getting in those spots and being in position to strike for goal is a credit to his determination, his athleticism, and how much he's improved over the course of the year.
It was such a great scene afterwards, a little bit of a field storm. What did it mean to you to be able to celebrate that championship in advance?
It's been so special, the connection we have with our community, with our alumni and the fans at our university, sharing that moment with our student section, the Park Avenue Army, and the joy that we all kind of shared together makes it even more special. We're, of course, delighted to win any game. It's hard to win games in the Big Ten in all sports, as you know, but to have that explosion of emotion and passion and to be connected with so many fans, families, our administrative staff, our coaching staff, really grateful to be able to lead this program here at Penn State.
Well, this is a historically excellent program. I mean, this is the 35th NCAA tourney appearance for Penn State soccer, so it's not like this is a program that is unfamiliar with success, but they'd gone 3 straight years without making the NCAA, or without finishing above 500, I should say, when you took over. So what was kind of the formula for getting it back to where you knew that it could be, and where it had been somewhat recently, but just not in the past few years?
Absolutely. It's very important to recognize the tradition and the success this program has had long before my arrival. And one thing we really wanted to establish, Dave, was to try to make sure that we search for talented players, first of all, in our state, and look to the Northeast, to our region, to attract great players here. And if you look at our roster, I think young players that have come up really having a great desire to represent this university, it makes a difference. And then start to broaden that out to some of the top players around the country, and in a few cases, some international players that have made this group really come together in a fairly short amount of time. I think that's one big thing we did. And then we've also used the overall athletic success of this university, and I often kind of joke when I walk up the stairs at Rec Hall and I look at the 7 national championships on our women's volleyball outside their offices, or the wrestling team we share space with, Erica Dombach, and women's soccer, men's volleyball. There's so much success. I find it very inspirational, and there's a great camaraderie among the programs here and the coaches, and we wanted to capitalize on that and try and join the ranks of what's just an impressive group of players and coaches across our athletic department.
You've been so successful throughout your career, your prior stops at Cincinnati and at Dartmouth, but then you were in the pro ranks for a while. So what was it about this job that made you say, I want to go back and coach college again?
Oh, it's a great question, and I was very happy in Philadelphia. I had an incredible experience there for nearly 6 years, and when I came out on my visit, it was this passion for excellence and the opportunity to combine world-class academics and elite sports participation competition was what really kind of sold me. And when I came out and saw all the commitments to doing things, the quote-unquote right way, if you will, to being committed to both your athletic pursuits and your academics in a great environment here in Center County, it was just too good to pass up, and I'm so pleased to be here.
I know they're pleased to have you as well. I'm going to leave you with this.
Sure.
As I said, you guys play on Sunday. It's either Hofstra or Lipscomb. You don't know who it is. You won't know until Thursday. So explain to me how that works. Like, do you spend these few days working on yourselves? Do you put in a scouting report for both teams? What's kind of what's the MO here when you have that uncertainty?
One of the big benefits, Dave, to being seeded is that we have a full week that we can take advantage of for practice, preparation. So we've already broken down Sunday's game and look at some of the things we think we could do a little bit better, and we'll focus on that as we build the practice plan for Wednesday and for Thursday. And then we have each of 2 of our assistants digging into the scout, one on Lipscomb and then one on Hofstra. So by the time we find out what our opponent's going to be, then we will be in a position to get ready to dig into the details of whoever it is will play Sunday here in the NCAA tournament.
Excellent. Well, we wish you the best of luck, Coach Cook. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us. Congratulations on not just one, but 2 Big Ten championships for the Nittany Lions this year.
Thanks so much. Great to spend some time with you.
Absolutely. Feeling is mutual.